Hi, welcome back to Jennifer Leads. I'm Jennifer. Today, we're going to discuss some of the characteristics of children who have dyslexia. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability. Researchers believe that as many as 1 in 5 children have dyslexia, and that as many as 80% of children who are receiving special education in schools actually have dyslexia. I'm going to start by reading a formal definition of dyslexia, and then we'll talk about what that means for you as a parent and some of the characteristics that you might see in your child. So in 2002, the International Dyslexia Association came up with a formal definition for dyslexia, and that is, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and/or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So that's the formal definition. Now what I want to do is talk to you about what you might notice as a parent. So first of all, you can start to notice the symptoms of dyslexia before a child ever even begins reading. So children who have dyslexia are generally late talkers. They start to speak a lot later than their typical peers. In general, children start to speak around 12 months of age. They'll say their first words. And then by 18 to 24 months, you'll usually notice that they're starting to put 2 to 3 word sentences together. Children who have dyslexia generally learn to speak a lot later than that. And then once they do learn to start speaking, they are often difficult to understand. Sometimes they'll have a very global speech difficulty where you'll notice that many sounds are difficult for them to say, or you often may notice that they mix sounds and syllables within words. So, for instance, when my son was learning to speak, the W, the R, the L, and the TH sounds, he produced all of those as a W sound. So his brain was not processing the differences within all of those speech sounds, and he was very difficult to understand. And then you can also have children who mix the sounds and syllables within the words. So one day he was asking me if I would play monodos with him, and I had to stop and think about how his brain works and what he meant by monodos, and of course he wanted to play dominoes. Other errors that he had were much more difficult to decipher. So for instance, for the word donut, he actually called it upduck. So he was mixing sounds and syllables and had substitutions and errors within that word as well. Not all children who have dyslexia will exhibit a speech sound disorder, but if you have a child who does have a global speech problem where they're very difficult to understand, it's highly likely that they have something going on with that phonological or that sound part of their brain. As children age and they start to go into preschool, then you'll notice that when they're trying to learn their letters and their sounds, they have a lot more difficulty than their typical peers, and they need a lot more repetition, and they need to practice those sounds and work on the letter sounds and letter names a lot more than their typical peers. And they also generally have a difficult time learning to sing the ABCs and to say their address and their phone number. All of those rote memory kinds of things are often more difficult. And as children move up then and go into elementary school, they have a difficult time with phonics, and they acquire phonics less easily than typical children. So they might learn that the C says k and the A says a and the T says t. But then when they try to put those together, k, at, and try to sound that word out in a book, they might come up with something similar like tack or tab, or they might just come up with something that is completely unrelated in sound structure. And So just like with their speech and their ABCs and learning the letters, sounds, they will learn typically to read, but they're still not reading the way a typical person would read. So they are not processing the sounds or sounding out the words the way you and I would do that. Oftentimes they'll look at the first letter of a word and guess, or they'll look at the picture and try to figure out what the word is, but they don't really know how to decode or how to put those sounds together to figure out what the words are. You'll also notice in their speech when they're trying to talk that they have a difficult time coming up with specific vocabulary words. So when they're trying to talk, you'll often see them try to talk around a word that they can't think of, and what they could have said in maybe 30 seconds turns into a 5-minute story because they're trying to think of the word that they want to say. Or you'll notice that they might use non-specific words like thingy-majig or stuff instead of using a specific word. And you'll see that a lot in their speech. They also do the tip of the tongue thing that we all do sometimes, where the word is on the tip of our tongue and we want to say the word and we know what that word is, we just can't get it to come out. So you'll notice all of those things in a child who has dyslexia. Also, children who have dyslexia tend to be terrible spellers. That tends to be the last thing that is changed, so the thing that kind of holds on the strongest. So even into high school, children who compensated well for their dyslexia and fooled us into thinking that they're reading well generally will still tend to be have a difficult time with spelling. As children enter into high school, you'll also notice that they have an extreme difficulty with learning foreign language. So they had a hard enough time trying to learn the English sounds and the English patterns and combinations, and now we're adding some more sounds and different patterns and combinations into their language, and they will struggle the same way that they did when they were learning English at trying to pick up on those sounds and patterns. As an adult, typically children who are dyslexic grow into adults who struggle with reading, who maybe don't like to read for fun, or who are really slow readers and have difficulty putting their thoughts onto paper. You'll also still see those words that they'll substitute for one another. So commuter for computer, or words that sound similar. They might slip out and say the wrong word when an adult who is dyslexic is trying to say those. So I have some checklists for you. The two checklists that I like the best would be the warning signs of dyslexia, and this breaks characteristics down into preschool age, characteristics you would expect in elementary school, in high school, and in adulthood. And you'll notice that as you're going over some of these checklists, you will probably see some of the things, some of the characteristics that you used to exhibit or your spouse used to exhibit. Dyslexia generally tends to run in families, so a lot of times we'll notice in ourselves some of the things that our own children struggle with. A second checklist that I really like to use is an older one. It's from 1997, and it's from an article that Hugh Catts had written. The name of the checklist is Early Identification of Language-Based Reading Disabilities. And I will provide a link to that article and to this checklist. And I will also provide a link that will allow you access to this checklist. If you're looking for a more thorough understanding besides just filling out a checklist, because obviously if you're watching this, you have some concerns that your child has dyslexia, this is a good place to start. And this is a book by Sally Shaywitz. She is a neuroscientist at Yale and a professor there as well. And this will include all of those characteristics, but it will also explain to you why we have those characteristics and what to expect from your child who has dyslexia, along with lots of remediation and helpful accommodations and modifications for you. So this is a great book to check out if you want to get a more deeper understanding of dyslexia and what it entails. Thank you for joining me today. I will be, again, putting links to all of those resources in the comments section and on my website so that you can access those. And next time we will be discussing an assessment, dyslexia assessment, what the parts of a good dyslexia assessment should entail, and what you should expect from those results. So I hope you'll join me again. I appreciate you coming and visiting me today. Thanks.